Before we start, just a quick note about the training you're about to watch. In February 2023, we changed our organization's name to Chapter 1. We've updated this video with the new Chapter 1 name where we can. However, you may hear or see references to the old program name, TutorMate.
Welcome to the Building Confident Readers training. This 30-minute session will cover the following topics: early reading and best practices, stories and other activities, and helpful hints for how to engage and work with a struggling or reluctant reader. Please don't worry about making notes during this training. You will be able to review this video and others in the e-learning center at your convenience. If you have had any exposure to 5 to 7-year-olds, you may have heard the term phonics, but may not know how it impacts early reading. Phonics is a way of teaching children how to read and write. It helps children hear, identify, and use different sounds that distinguish one word from another in the English language. Please be assured that we are not expecting you to be an expert in phonics. That's the teacher's role. Your role is to provide supported reading practice and help them gain confidence in their ability to read fluently. However, having an understanding of the role phonics plays in early reading will help you support your student as you read with them each week. Phonics involves matching sounds with letters or groups of letters. Learning how letters sound when they are combined will help children decode words as they read. This is particularly helpful when trying to sound out unfamiliar words. For example, when a child is taught the sounds for the letters T, P, A, and S, they can start to build the words tap, pat, and sat. As you'll learn later in this video, our story library includes stories specifically created to help students practice decoding words. And when students can learn the art of decoding words, they are well on their way to becoming fluent readers. Let's talk about how you can make the best use of your time with your student. The time you spend practicing with your student, encouraging them and praising their efforts, will create a safe environment where they can learn and grow. Don't underestimate the impact you'll have. Something as simple as sharing your own enthusiasm and love for reading is a powerful tool. While we are not asking you to be an expert in phonics or early education, it is helpful to understand the skills students need as they work towards becoming better readers. There are 4 components to becoming a proficient reader. The first is having a strong oral vocabulary. The second is having enough knowledge of the world to give context to what the student is reading. The third is being able to read a passage fluently. And the fourth is being able to comprehend that passage. These are all interrelated, and during the course of the year with your student, you will help them build these skills. The skill we would like you to focus on with your student is fluency. Fluency is the ability to read a passage with reasonable speed and expression so that it sounds natural. When reading fluently, the student doesn't need to expend too much processing power on a particular word and can think about the word in its totality. The key skill a student will need in order to read fluently is called word attack. Word attack is learning how to read words that are not easily read by sight. In order to sound out these words, the student needs to have some form of phonics-based strategy. Our word attack strategy has 3 simple components: chuck it, flip it, and skip it. Let's look at a simple sentence. I have a plan. The student will likely know the first 3 words by sight. However, the last word, plan, the student is unlikely to know by sight. In order to understand the sentence, the student will need to know some kind of phonics strategy to sound out the word. The student may try to sound out each letter and then blend them together, but that is difficult for a 6-year-old and may lead to frustration. The word attack we recommend is called chunking. Every syllable has chunks, also known as onsets and rhymes. The onset is the letter that comes before the first vowel, and the rhymes are the letters that follow the first vowel. In our example plan, pul is the onset and an is the rhyme. When a student comes across a difficult word and knows how to use the chunking strategy, they can sound out each chunk, pul, an, plan, to attack that difficult word. The second strategy is called flip it. Flipping a vowel sound can help a student make sense of a word that is difficult to sound out. For example, When sounding out the word table, the student is likely to sound out the word using the short vowel sound, such as ta. Coaching the student to flip the short vowel sound for a long vowel sound will help the student sound out the word. The third strategy is called skip it. While we want students to give the word a try, we don't want them to dwell too long on a word they can't seem to identify. Have your student continue reading the sentence and return to the difficult word after you finish the story. Now that you've learned helpful strategies to use during the tutoring session, let's take a moment to review activities. Prior to your session, the classroom computer will be sitting in a virtual queue, waiting for you to connect. When your call is answered and you indicate that your student is available, your computer connects with the classroom computer in the virtual queue. Unlike screen sharing, your computer and the classroom computer are independent, even though they display the same material. As the tutor, you control the session and decide what activities to show your student. As we discussed in the TutorMate Basics video, there may be times when it is unclear if the student is viewing the same material as you. To view a representation of the child's screen, click on the icon at the top of the screen, and a window will appear which shows you what the child ought to see on their screen. This will help you direct them if they are unsure of what to do, or if it's unclear they are viewing what you sent. This feature is a guide only and should not replace reaching out to chat support for assistance. The first step to getting started with activities will be to select your student's reading level. This is done for both flashcards and stories. Reading levels are set by the teacher and will be listed above the reading level buttons. At the beginning of the year, each student is assessed by their teacher and assigned a reading level based on word knowledge, comprehension, and fluency. The students selected for the program will be emerging readers who have mastered letter names and letter sounds and are now ready to focus on learning to sound out and read simple words. Making sure students are reading at the correct reading level throughout the year is important to their success. If a child struggles consistently with the text and gets frustrated, they are likely to want to give up. The opposite is also true. If a student is reading material easily and understands the meaning of what they have read, it's time to move them to more challenging reading material to fend off boredom. To ensure the content of the stories found in our program are properly leveled, IFL follows reading levels used in most schools, with levels ranging from simple text in level A to more difficult text in level L. So how do you know when your student is reading at his or her correct reading level? The goal is for your student to be able to read approximately 80% of the words in a story without having to stop frequently to sound out words. If your student is flying through the text and they understand the meaning of what they have read, then it's time to consider moving them to the next reading level in the program. Teachers may also update reading levels, but if a teacher doesn't move the student's reading level after a 30-day period, the system will prompt you to move the student to that next reading level. If you find the material is too difficult for your student, you can always move them back to the previous reading level and then try advancing them again in the following week. While we have suggestions about the time you could spend on each activity, do remember that this is not set in stone. Feel free to experiment with what works best for you and the child you're supporting. Now let's take a look at the activities in the tutoring application. The first activity in the sequence is flashcards. Flashcards has two functions. It gives students the opportunity to practice sight words, and it tests students' knowledge of words that have similar beginning or ending sound patterns. These are also known as onsets and rhymes. Practicing sight words and onsets and rhymes will help your student increase reading proficiency. Spend 5 minutes at the beginning of your session on flashcards. Once your student is reading at level G, discontinue playing flashcards and focus more time on reading. When playing flashcards, click on a word. Your student will see the same word on their screen. Each time your student gets a word correct, mark the word green by clicking on the green button. If your student struggles with a word or gives an incorrect response, mark the card red by clicking on the red button. Your student will only see the words you show them and will not see the words you've color-coded in green or in red. To confirm your student has received the flashcard you sent, Watch for the Sending to and Received by prompt. This feature is available for every activity and will help you gauge when the student can see the material you sent. The next activity in the series is stories. Reading stories out loud is the practice students need most. Ideally, you should spend 15 to 20 minutes reading stories each week. When you're ready to read a story, click on the story icon from the activity menu. Select the appropriate reading level and click Continue to open the story library. A library of leveled books will be displayed on both your screen and on the student's screen. The student will tell you which book he or she would like to read by giving you the number next to the book title. Depending on what level your student is reading at, there are two different types of stories to choose from: reading stories and decodable stories. Reading stories are included at each reading level and use words that students are learning in first grade. By reading these stories, students are increasing their word knowledge and practicing newly learned words. The library also includes stories that are written to help students learn to decode words. These decodable stories are included in levels C and D only. The repeated readings of the decodable stories help readers with fluency and word recognition, especially as it relates to phonics patterns and high-frequency words students often see in first-grade text. At the higher levels, reading stories include very engaging texts, covering varying topics, many of which are sponsored by our partners. Some include science-related content about Earth, space exploration, and chemistry. Let's take a look at a typical story. When you choose a story from the library, the child will see page 1 of that story on their screen. While you can advance the stories forward using the arrow keys, your student will not have that option and can only see the page number. You might decide to look through the whole book with your student before reading it. You can mention some of the key words and give them a sense of the story before they read it, which can boost the confidence of early or reluctant readers. When you start to read each page, you can help the student prepare to read by asking them to look at the picture and describe what they think the story is about or what might happen next. You may also want to take turns reading with your student if they often struggle. You could alternate reading each page. This is a good way of taking the pressure off, as well as model fluent expressive reading. As you read, you may want your student to focus on a particular word. You can do this in two ways. First, you can click on a word on your screen which will highlight the word on the child's view of the page. Or, you can show that word to your student by typing in the message box. For example, if your student is struggling with the word sing, you can type the word in the message student box and send that word to your student. Remind them to sound it out using their phonics, but don't hesitate to give them the word if they seem stuck. When you send the word to your student in this way, it will appear for them as if it was spoken by a small owl in the top left of the screen. Asking them what the owl is saying is a good way to check they can see the word you've sent. Asking questions about the story is a good way to see if your student is able to remember the key points of the story. But helping a child develop their comprehension skills is about much more than asking questions to test their memory. Comprehension is about developing connections between what they've seen in the book and the world they understand. Can the student tell you about the story in their own words, or make connections between the story and their own experiences? How would they feel if they were a character in the story? Having empathy with characters helps create thoughtful readers. Not all stories include comprehension questions, but feel free to spend time asking your student about the story when you're finished reading. Did they like it? If so, why? If a story does include comprehension questions, they will be presented on your screen at the end of the story. The student's screen will display pictures to help them remember what the story is about. If you selected I Speak Spanish when you registered, you may be paired with an early English language learner. When reading stories with your student, you'll have the option to toggle between the English and Spanish version. This will help support word learning if your student is struggling with a passage in English. If the student is struggling with the English version of the text, flip to the Spanish version. Reading the passage in Spanish will help the student better understand the context of the story when reading the same passage in English. In addition to providing stories for practicing reading and fluency skills, we also provide students with word games designed to build knowledge of words and word parts. You can fit these in between stories or at the end of your session. To view step-by-step directions, click on the Directions link at the top of each page. In the word sort activity, students will practice sorting words based on their word endings. This is a great practice for students learning how to sound out words. As the tutor, you will select the word from the menu. Your student will only see the same word you select. Ask your student where the word belongs based on the word ending. Once you click on the appropriate box, the word will populate and the student will see the same word on their screen. Once all of the words have been placed in a box, draw your student's attention to the similarities of the words. Then, have your student read the words in each box. 3 in a row is a favorite activity for many students. This additional exposure to words will help encourage fluent reading and word identification. When you're ready to begin, determine who will be an X and who will be an O. Notice each box has a word. Your students can see the same words. Taking turns, you and your student will try to be the first to get 3 X's or O's in a row, up, down, across, or diagonally. When you place an X or an O in the box, your student will see the same thing on their screen. Mystery word is a fun way of learning vocabulary and will help students remember the spelling of new words. To begin, think of a word or use one of the suggested words found on the right side of your screen. The student cannot see these words. When you have the word in mind, click the number that matches the number of letters in the word. Your student will see the same number of blank spaces on their screen. As your student begins to guess letters, click the letter on the keyboard. This will highlight that letter for both you and your student. Place the cursor on the appropriate line and select the letter using your computer keyboard. Your student will see each letter on their screen. You may find your student needs a little help getting started with this activity. Consider filling in the first letter, or offering a clue to help your student guess the word. Word World is a fun way for students to practice spelling and word patterns. To play, spin the wheel to begin. A word will appear on your screen, but the student will not see the word. The spinner will stop on a letter, which will populate on the student's screen. Click No to continue spinning until there are enough letters for the student to guess what the word might be, or until the student can read the word on the screen. Click Yes when the student guesses the word, or play the game again. The whiteboard simulates a magnetic board and is great for practicing spelling, difficult words, or making up fun stories. Type a word or phrase in the field at the bottom of the screen. When you click Submit Word, your student will see the same word or phrase on their screen. You can also move words and phrases around by dragging anywhere on the board. While it may be tempting to spend more time with your student, please end your session promptly at the end of 30 minutes. There may be another tutor scheduled immediately after your session, and the system only allows for one tutoring session to be running at a time. Initially, many students chosen to participate in TutorMate may struggle from a lack of confidence, and you may encounter children who are very shy and hesitant to read out loud. Remember that children chosen for TutorMate often find reading difficult and so need extra encouragement to persevere. If you are supporting a child who is at the very early stages of learning to read, it's important to try to build enjoyment and excitement into your reading sessions. Talking about the pictures in a book, enjoying listening to someone else read, and taking pleasure in the characters and storyline of a book are equally important during this early stage of learning. As you read with your student, week after week, you might find the strategies helpful when looking for new ways to keep the child interested in reading. Spend some time reviewing the title page. Ask the student questions about what they see on the cover illustration. Can they make a prediction about what the story is about? Take a picture walk through the book. Go through each page of the book and talk about the illustrations. What does your reader notice in the pictures? What clues can they spot that might suggest what the story is about? Does your reader have a story they love to read? If so, use the revisit and repeat technique. Each time your reader revisits the same story, they become more and more familiar with the sounds that are repeated throughout the story. This repetition helps children remember and sound out words that may have been difficult the first time they read the story. If a child is struggling or seems reluctant, please stick with them and offer them encouragement and praise. It may be that you need to read with your student for less than 30 minutes in the beginning to build up their concentration. You might want to take turns reading if they struggle and get them to spot any mistakes that you make. Periodically, consider reading a story to your student that is at a higher reading level. Stories at higher levels, which may be too difficult for very young early readers, provide content that your student may find interesting. As you work with your student, keep in mind that rewarding their success is an important component in building reading confidence. It'll boost their self-esteem and make them feel great. While verbal praise is very motivating and should be given often, we also provide several high-five pop-ups that you can use to further reward your students' hard work. When giving praise, explain what it is they did so well. You and your assigned student will work together for the entire school year. As you work together, be sure to document their progress in the Notes section of the portal. The Notes section is for your reference only and a good way for you to track what you've worked on each week. You can take notes during a session or after the session has ended by clicking on the Notes link. The child's teacher will not see these notes. When calling the classroom for your session, keep in mind that early grade classrooms are very busy and can be unpredictable. Young students are always on the move, which means that your calls may not get answered right away and may occasionally be missed. Please try calling back if you do not receive an answer on the first attempt. Sometimes it takes a little bit longer for the phone greeter to answer the call. If you still do not get an answer after a second attempt, reschedule your session or contact the support desk so they can check the tutoring computer. First grade classrooms do get noisy, and some classroom activities can create a lot of commotion. If you find that a noisy classroom consistently interferes with your tutoring session, contact the live chat agent, as they may be able to help. After each and every session, we ask that you provide us with brief feedback on your tutoring experience. While feedback after every session may seem unnecessary, it does provide us with helpful information that might impact your next session as well as the sessions of your fellow teammates. We've tried to make it quick and easy and appreciate your entries. We've now reached the end of your training. We hope you enjoyed it. Do remember that you have access to all of this content as well as facts in our e-learning center. Thank you for taking the time to learn about our program.